right, welcome back to another episode with the Art of Football 365. This is season 2, episode 7, segment 2, and we are joined by Nate Boyer, ex Green-Beret in the Army, ex Texas Longhorn, former Seattle Seahawk, and also has a story with Colin Kaepernick to share a little bit about. So we're blessed to have you on with another segment. And before we get started, go ahead and spike the subscribe button. Leave a like as many times as Tony Romo calls out the play at the line of scrimmage before it's even ran. And leave a comment, just like Troy Aikman does every time Joe Buck doesn't make any sense. And our three sponsors are Driftless Quality Wear, 312 Beef and Sausage, and Bacher Auto Group. So check them out and support them just like they've supported us. So I just want to start this off by saying, Nate, thanks for joining us, and thank you for your service as well.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's my honor to be here, fellas.
All right, so I think we can dive right into these questions and get going.
Yeah, Nate. So we just kind of want to, we do this with every first guest we have with the first question. Kind of introduce yourself, kind of give us some background knowledge into who Nate Boyer is as a person, veteran, former athlete, and even an actor.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area in El Cerrito, which is like the East Bay, across the Bay Bridge from San Francisco. Grew up mostly there. Was born in Tennessee, but yeah, grew up in the Bay. After high school, moved down to San Diego for a little bit. Worked on a fishing boat, did all kinds of odd jobs, and then came up to Los Angeles to pursue film and television. Back in the early 2000s, and then in 2001, 9/11 happened, kind of changed my trajectory for a while. So I ended up going into the military, became a Green Beret. So I was in the Army Special Forces for a total of about 10 years. Most of that on active duty, some of that in the National Guard. Went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, eventually went to Texas, the University of Texas to be specific, where I went to college and walked on the football team. I guess the most unique part about that is I'd never played football before growing up. So I played other sports, and football was always like my favorite to watch anyway. And I just didn't really do it when I was younger, and wasn't necessarily a great athlete. Definitely not a great athlete, but a decent athlete, and just someone that kind of works hard and just looks for any opportunity they can get. So that opportunity for me was long snapping. I found my way on the field via long snapping, and started for 3 years at Texas, and then was fortunate enough to get a training camp invite, signed as a free agent with the Seattle Seahawks. Went out to training camp and played in a little bit in the preseason, and that was pretty much that. Since then, I co-founded a charity with Jay Glazer called MVP, which stands for Merging Vets and Players. We're actually opening a Dallas chapter. I see all that Dallas Cowboys crap in the background.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm not a Cowboys fan by any means, but
Dak Prescott getting that money yesterday.
Did he sign a big contract? I don't even know.
Yep, 4-year, $160 million.
Jeez.
He got his bag. He's the second highest paid quarterback now, I think, right behind Mahomes. But you mentioned that MVP with Jay Glazer. Isn't that where Aldon Smith worked out before he signed with the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, he worked out at Unbreakable Performance Center as Glazer's gym. So yeah, he did, and then he's been out there in Dallas. This last year was his first season, right?
Yeah, it was the first year back after like 5 years.
Yeah, so he was a Niner. I mean, because I'm a Niner fan, so he was a Niner, and he was great. Got in a little bit of trouble. Had some off the field issues and whatnot, but always been a great player. Really good heart, man. I've got to hang with him a few times, and so I wish the best for him. I hope he keeps growing and doing what he does on the field, but keeps growing off the field, because he's a pretty special dude.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of based on your upbringing and stuff, I want to ask you kind of to describe your greatest influence growing up that kind of made you who you are today, and how they affect your personality and who you became.
Greatest influence, man. I mean, probably my parents, to be honest. They both worked really hard to get where they got. My dad's a racehorse veterinarian, and so that dude worked 7 days a week, like 12-hour days, even on Christmas, when I was growing up. So it was just a tough job. And then my mom, she's an environmental engineer, and put herself through school, and then eventually got her PhD from Berkeley, which is a really tough school to get in. This was kind of a time where not a lot of women were in the engineering field, especially at a high level.
Yeah.
So she sort of broke a few barriers with that, which is pretty awesome. But they always worked very hard and were very focused on their careers, but never sacrificed time with their family and time with their kids. So they're just selfless people. So I would say that my parents more than anybody. I know that's probably a pretty standard answer, I guess, but it definitely, it's definitely true for me. I had other people in my life or people I looked up to. They weren't even necessarily in my life, just heroes of mine, whether in sports or whatever. But they definitely shaped me more than anything.
No, that's 100% true. You get a good family life and parents that raise you the right way. You can't go wrong with saying that as your answer. But you hinted on earlier about with the 9/11 attack and all that kind of altering your path on wanting to enlist in the military. Was that kind of your first thing, like, oh, this is something that I want to do, or is there kind of a back thought as you were growing up that you wanted to be in the military, and then after that, kind of touch on what did the military do for you that nothing else has ever done? Just kind of turned you into a man, and just talk about some of those experiences.
Yeah, I honestly, I briefly thought about it in high school, but it was really because I just didn't want to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I met with a recruiter from the Army, had him over to my folks' house to meet with us. And super nice guy, and I was thinking about being an Army Ranger at the time. And, but it just didn't feel, I don't know, I definitely wasn't ready. And because something like that, it's just like anything that's pretty life changing. I mean, even going to college, it's a big commitment. You should be in the right mindset of like, of course, you're going to have a good time and enjoy your life, but you don't want to be wasting your time either, and or anybody else's. And so, yeah, the military was something that I had thought about before, but not super seriously. So 9/11 happens. A couple years after that, I end up uh, doing some relief work over in the Darfur, which is this region between Sudan and Chad. Back in 2004, it was sort of in the midst of a genocide out there. Like 300,000 people had been murdered, and the refugee camps were getting overflowed, and they were shorthanded. They need help. So I went out there on my own, just kind of, made my way to the refugee camps and volunteer for a couple of months, and it just changed my life. I knew I wanted to like fight for people like that, and I actually got malaria the last week I was there, and I was sitting up in this bed, and this family took care of me. This poor family out there, they didn't have nothing, but they were like nursing me back to health. They wouldn't take a dime from me, and they put this little radio next to my cot with a Bob Marley tape in it. So I started listening to Bob Marley for I flipped the tape over like 3 times. Then I was just like, I was sick of Bob Marley. So I started flipping through the radio stations, and the only one that came through was the BBC, which is like the British Broadcasting Corporation or whatever. I don't actually know what it stands for. I think it's that, but it's basically it's their biggest news outlet. And so I'm listening to the news, and they're talking about this like play-by-play of the Second Battle of Fallujah, and how these Marines were going over there and fighting for these people. And I just was like, I kind of just made the decision right there. I was like, man, when I come back, I'm going to join the military. That's what I'm going to do. I mean, I want to, nothing wrong with like Peace Corps type work and all that. It's very important, it's solid stuff. But for me, I wanted to fight for people. And I just had a sort of a different mindset, a little more, I don't want to say adventurous, but I guess willing to sacrifice my well-being and just being part of something that I was proud of, and feeling like I was doing the most that I could, the most that I was capable of doing to help people like that. So that's when I came back and joined, and I found out about the Special Forces contract called this 18 X-ray contract, where you could come off the street, and if you had, I think you had to be at the time. I think you had to be. I want to say you had to be 21 years old, but I know it's not true now, and it may not have been true then either, actually. But you're supposed to like have, preferably you had some college under your belt. I had taken some classes, but also like you had to take the psych eval, language aptitude test, like a physical test, flight exam, and then your standard like ASVAB, which is like the military SAT, and you have to score a certain mark on each section of that. And so after I took all those tests, I scored high enough to qualify. So I went out to basic training and airborne school. And after we got done, jumping out of airplanes, we went straight to special forces selection, which was it's got a high attrition rate. Like not a lot of people make it through, but if you didn't quit and you made it through everything, they put you in the special forces qualification course, where you would spend about 1.5 years training to be a Green-Beret. And if you finished all that stuff, you graduate and you'd earn that beret, and they put you on a special forces team and you start deploying. So, through that, I learned a ton about myself. But I think through my deployments, I learned, what it really is to be courageous. And it's not always being willing to like step in front of a bullet. It's being willing to listen to people that you don't necessarily agree with and have conversations with people where the cultures and customs are so different than what you're used to. And they just seem so wrong. You're so sure that can't be the right way. But you develop this understanding that like, just because you feel strongly about something and it means so much to you and you feel in your heart that it's got to be right, it doesn't mean it's the only way to do things or the only way to believe something, So I think that shaped me more than anything, that time with the Iraqis and Afghans that I spent and fighting alongside those guys too, because they became our brothers in arms as well. And then also just the leadership from the American soldiers I fought alongside. Some of those guys didn't make it back. My best friend eventually died later in a trading accident. But I kind of try to carry on my best with the way that he lived his life and the other guys that I was fighting alongside, because they were so selfless, but also like just so willing to do whatever it took to get the mission done, and never quit. And like that's a mindset I try to carry through the rest of my life, and it's hard sometimes, but I just do the best that I can.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that was a great, thorough answer. I appreciate that very much. And I kind of want to ask you now, like, based on the military experience, now that we have the military background of you, and uh, how did it relate to football with you? Like the brotherhood atmosphere of it. Like when people think football, you think of brotherhood, and obviously, I think you could say the same thing about the military. It's a brotherhood. It's a family. So, kind
Yeah.
of describe how those two atmospheres relate.
Yeah. I mean, the military, I mean, that's what MVP is all about, but those locker rooms are very similar. I never compare combat to playing a game or anything like that, but the sacrifice to be elite, the camaraderie, um, doing everything you can for the man on your left and right so that the mission is successful or winning a game is possible. Like the best teams out there in sports are the ones that people are willing to do the thankless job, uh, and then they don't necessarily need all the credit, and they just want to set the team up for the best opportunity to score. I mean, that's what it takes. It doesn't matter who scores the bucket. It's just that the ball went through the hoop. That's all that should matter. Um, and it's a lot of like, you got to swallow your pride and all that stuff. And it's the same in the military. It's not easy. It's not like everybody's just automatically selfless. You know what I mean? You got to work at those things, and you got to be willing to like not get noticed sometimes, and not get validated for the work you're doing, and know that that's okay, because that you did it. You know what you did. Your teammates know what you did, and that's all that should really matter. And then you just identify so much with that uniform, because part of it's because that's how society sort of identifies you, but also like, that it's a short lifespan as far as how long you do those jobs. I mean, typically you're in your 20s, maybe 30s if you're lucky. And it's like, you can still be in the military, but you're not going to be kicking doors down, doing the things that you want to do. You can still work in sports, do something in sports, but you're not going to be on the field anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you lose that uniform that you identify with. So in a way, it feels like you lose your identity and who you are. And then you're trying to figure out like, I mean, who am I? Like, what am I supposed to do now? How do I fit in? I'll never feel, you get scared that you'll never feel that sense of team anymore, and that sense of like purpose and the adrenaline rushes, all that stuff. It's hard to replicate that. So that's I think a big challenge. And I've been lucky to find some things in my life that motivate me enough, or that are challenging enough, that make me feel that same way, at least a little bit, that same, like, a bit of stress is not always a bad thing, as long as it's not, negative stress where you're beating yourself up. So, but yeah, those things are so intertwined. The stakes aren't the same, it's not life and death when you're playing a game, but there are a lot of similarities that people, I think, overlook.
No, I mean, that's great words of advice to live by. And a lot of people need that and kind of need to self-check themselves and just kind of get reevaluated with themselves also. But, what led you to leave the military? And then how did you ultimately end up in Austin and play for the University of Texas? Talk about that tryout experience and kind of what made you get to that. And what was the idea in your head behind all that?
I remember being in Iraq and thinking that if I don't go to college, I was 28 years old at the time when I was deployed, and I was thinking, if I don't go to college now or soon, I'm probably never going to go. And I had like a year left on my contract, so the Army was asking me if I wanted to reenlist and stay in, I don't know, 4 more years or whatever it was. I'd already done 5 at that point, and I was just thinking about it. I was like, no, I don't think I want to. I do want to keep serving. I don't want to like totally get out necessarily, but I do want to go to college. And, and I was probably right. Like if I waited any longer, I probably wouldn't have went at all. And so I decided to just go, and I turned 29. Texas was the only school that I enrolled. What am I trying to say? Applied to. And part of it was because I know Texas, as a state, really takes care of their veterans, but also Austin is an awesome town. It's like one of the greatest cities in America, if not the greatest, in my opinion. It's so much fun. There's a good mix of culture. I remember when I first got to Texas, this cab driver picked me up at the airport before Uber and all that. And he was like driving me into town, and he's asked me if I've ever been to Austin. And I said, no. And he said, the best thing about Austin is everybody gets along. Like, all the cowboys smoke pot and all the hippies carry guns. Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. and it kind of has that vibe, I mean, of course, not everybody sees eye to eye, but I feel like everyone gets along there for the most part. And, it's not like that everywhere in the country, unfortunately. And it's not perfect either, but it's a pretty damn cool place. And so that weighed on me heavy, but also, Mac Brown was a head coach at the time, and he'd done a USO tour recently to Iraq and Afghanistan. And some people that I knew that had met him over there was like, dude, he was so cool. Like, he made the helicopter wait extra long because he wanted to shake everybody's hand that wanted to meet him and, spend time with the troops. And I was like, well, shoot, if I go there, like the odds of him cutting me are probably low. So I'll go to Texas. And I applied, I got into school, and then just went to the walk-on tryouts. I was in really good shape, like endurance-wise. I just didn't know what the hell I was doing football-wise. But I had good coaches. One of them, actually, the guy that kind of coached me up on learning how to play a little bit of defensive back, which is enough to get me on the team, is the special teams and safeties coach at Texas now, Blake Gideon. I don't know if you remember him, but he played from, I think, 2008 to 2012 or so. And anyway, he's a good dude. We stayed close, but yeah, that's what led me to Texas.
Oh, that's awesome. And I kind of wanted to mention how I was, before this video, I was watching some of your past interviews on YouTube, and I happened to come across the video where I seen how you trained when you were on tour with the board and the cutout and snapping the ball. I thought that was pretty.
I made like a plywood target. So I went into the Texas National Guard when I was at UT, and after that first year, I was just on the scout team, trying to play safety. Not fast enough though, not good enough, and quickly realized like I wasn't going to make it on the field as a defensive back. So I started long snapping just to try to find a way on the field. And then I joined the Texas National Guard. They sent me overseas that summer, and so I was in Afghanistan, and I built this target out of plywood. It had like a bigger hole for punts that was like hip height, and then like a smaller one for field goals and extra points that was like, I don't know, 1.5 feet off the ground or whatever. And I would just, snap footballs through those holes. And like for like the field goal extra point, I would have to, I'd have to get 10 in a row without hitting the sides at all to be good. And I don't know what I was doing with punts. But yeah, eventually you get pretty consistent at it, you know, and you kind of, it's just like any kind of muscle memory. It's like shooting a free throw, really. It's the same every time, no matter where you are on the field. It's the same like movement. Obviously, once you snap it, you got to react to somebody trying to block a punt or, you know,
For
come to
sure.
block a kick, and you have to block them, and then you got to run down and try to make a tackle, which, you know, I didn't make very many of, but the long snap itself is like, it's like a closed skill, you know, it's the same every time. So if you get that good routine going, just like when people step up the line to shoot a free throw, you know, some guys, they dribble 3 times, spin it once, you know, take a deep breath, shoot. They do the same thing every time. And that's how you build that consistency. It's the same with long snapping.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of, you know, you're pretty cool experiences with being a special forces in the military and then being a high level D1 football player and then playing in the NFL. Just kind of talk about some of those experiences, some of the guys you met along the way, and some of your closest relationships that you still kind of keep in touch with that were big in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I keep in touch with a lot of guys that I play with. You know, I was just in Seattle for a very short time. I mean, like 4 or 5 months. So didn't get as close with those guys, but I do keep in touch with some of those guys. I mean, I was lucky in Seattle, especially just to be there. It was right after they'd been to back-to-back Super Bowls. And it was like Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson, Michael Bennett, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Doug Baldwin, Bobby
Wow.
Wagner.
The Legion of Boom.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham. Like it was such a squad, man. Like they're just, and they're, you know, and they're all good dudes too, you know. But yeah, and it's funny. The Seahawks are so different now. The team is so different, but they're still competitive every year. Like I still believe that Russ will be back in the Super Bowl, you know, and maybe win another one. Who knows?
You think it'll be with Seattle?
Oh, I don't know, man. You know what? Yeah, that's right. I heard about those rumors. That's a good point. I don't know. I can't see him being anywhere else. I feel like he's a Steph Curry. Like I feel like Steph Curry will never leave the Warriors.
Just belongs with that.
Yeah, I can't
like,
see Seattle letting him walk. I mean, that's tough
Yeah.
letting your franchise.
I mean, it happens though. You never would have thought Tom Brady would have played with anyone else.
Oh, I know.
That's a great point.
All right. So speaking of the NFL, and after your career was over, you were pretty much asked to, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were asked to write a letter or an article to, was it the Army Tribune, about this Kaepernick stuff?
Yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of asked, but go ahead, finish your question. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask you, kind of like describe the contents of that article / letter, and what the purpose of writing that letter was, and how it related to Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, so this was in 2016 during the last election cycle, and you know we were already feeling pretty divided as a country, I think, and you know, like I said, I grew up a Niners fan, and specifically, I was a big Kaepernick fan because we sucked for a long time. You know, ever since we lost Steve Young, it was like Montana and Young. We won 5 Super Bowls over like a 12-year span, and then we were barely making the playoffs, if ever, over the next, you know, almost 20 years. Like
Well, you wonder how I feel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you get it. So like, you know, and now the Niners are, I mean, they're good again, which is awesome, but like, not this last year, but you know what I mean. But they've been, you know, we got back to the Super Bowl, and that's great. But Kaepernick was one of the, you know, the big pieces to that puzzle. I mean, they had drafted Alex Smith, you know, first pick overall, and obviously Alex Smith's very talented quarterback. It just didn't work out. You know, they just weren't winning the games they were hoping to win, and they were kind of pretty mediocre as a team. You know, and Harbaugh comes in, shakes some things up, and you know, and Kaepernick gets an opportunity. He'd been there for a season or two, and I remember watching him in training camp, and I was like, "Damn, this dude is special. Like he can, you know, they got to at least have some packages for him because he's so dynamic." And later that season, I think Alex Smith had an injury. Cap got an opportunity and just never looked back. I mean, they took him all the way to the Super Bowl, and then the next year all the way back to the NFC Championship. So like 2 years in a row just was awesome. You know, running for he had multiple games where he'd run and pass for like over 200 yards, and won some pretty big ones. Almost won that Super Bowl, and then. So 2016, you know, his play had diminished a bit. He had some injuries of his own. The team wasn't doing so well. You know, Harbaugh was out. things changed, and now he was a backup quarterback at this point. And in this preseason, like I said, it was the middle of that election cycle, pretty divisive time. Kaep started sitting on the bench, and he had said that it was in protest of police brutality and racial inequality, and social injustice. And basically he said, I'm not going to stand for the flag of a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. And this was when there was so many of those stories being highlighted, with not only a situation where law enforcement was, killing unarmed Black men. And when I say that, it's a complicated issue. It's definitely a complicated issue. It's not a simple thing, but that's not for me to hash out. I will say that the fact that a lot of these officers, this was something Kaep would talk about, were getting paid leave while they're figuring out the situation, when it was like on video, seemingly pretty clear that like maybe they shouldn't be not only getting paid leave, but maybe they shouldn't be out there while the case is underway. I mean, it's still, there's somebody was killed, you know what I mean? And anyway, it's like I said, a complicated issue. Because I know it's not easy to be a law enforcement officer. I was in the military, and there's some really hard decisions you have to make. That's not an easy job. But at the same time, like, there needs to be there needed to be police reform, and accountability needed to be held. And I don't disagree with that. So anyway, that's why Kaepernick started sitting on the bench during the anthem. And I wrote this open letter through the Army Times because I got reached out to by like CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and all these cable news networks that wanted me to go on and talk about the situation, just because I was in the military and then also played football the year prior. I was with the Seahawks, and I was like, man, I don't really want to argue about this, or like, I'm kind of in the middle. Like I have my personal opinions and feelings about stuff. I'm not like all one way or all the other. And so I ended up writing this letter through the Army Times, because they'd reached out and said, hey, would you write something for us, for a lot of the people in the military to maybe read? And I was like, man, I'm not the authority on what's right and what's wrong and what people should be doing just because I played football and served. Like, it's not up to me. And they were like, yeah, we understand that, but just, you can write whatever you want. So I wrote an open letter to Colin, as if I had him in the room for 5 minutes, just explaining why I feel the way I feel, why those symbols mean a lot to me. I've carried caskets draped in American flags, and when I hear the anthem, I get emotional often, because it means something different to me because of my experiences. But at the same time, like, I don't know what it's like to feel like anybody else but myself, and I shouldn't be judging anybody else for the way that they feel about those things and how they feel like America has treated them or not treated them well. And so, I told them at the end of the day, we took the oath to defend the Constitution, which includes the First Amendment. And if you're exercising that right peacefully, then I support that. I might not fully support the message or even the method, but like, that's a right that I'll support. And Colin ended up, first of all, the letter went like crazy viral. Colin ended up reaching out and wanted to meet with me. So I went and met him the next day in San Diego. They were playing the Chargers in their final preseason game. And it was like military appreciation night. Kaep was going to be starting because, in the final preseason game, the starters don't play. So he was a backup at the time. So he was starting that game. I think he played pretty much the whole game, most of the game anyway. And they had like a flyover and Navy SEALs jumping in the stadium and like this whole deal. San Diego's a very military town. And so we talked about it in the hotel before the game. Like, he's like, what do you think I should do? And I was like, man, I mean, he said he's going to protest either way again, but he's like, I'm committed to not standing, but do you think there's another way I can do something that's not going to offend people in the military? And I suggested being alongside his teammates first and foremost, because I thought that was important, important gesture to show that, like, you guys might not all agree on everything, but you support one another, and you're willing to be alongside each other. And so then I said, if you're willing to be next to your teammates, the only option you have is taking a knee, because anything else, besides standing is probably going to look ridiculous. And so he agreed, and I said, look, people take a knee to pray and propose to their future spouse. And like if a player's on the field is hurt, other players will often take a knee out of respect. And when I go to Arlington to visit, some of my brothers, like I take a knee in front of their headstones to pay respect. So I think that would be a good gesture. He agreed. He thought it was better than sitting, actually. And so that's where the kneeling kind of came from. And I stood next to him that night during the game, and some people booed, which was kind of crazy. But I mean, we see how it's still been such a thing over the last 4 or 5 years, such an important topic, and something that we're all talking about still. And part of that probably led to some of the progress and the protests that happened this year after George Floyd. I don't know if it would have been at that level without what Colin was willing to do. I'm not sure.
No, that's 100% true. I think Kaepernick was definitely paved the way for that type of stuff. And, there's been a lot of outreach and support with him since last June, all that stuff that happened with George Floyd. And there's a lot of controversy and bad comments about him before that. And now he's kind of looked at as a hero with some of that type of stuff. So he definitely went out on a limb, and it was cool to hear that about with you, that you were in it with him and just kind of that you stepped up and had a voice in it. And that's pretty cool to hear. But, kind of switching topics for your last question here. When you look back on everything in your life so far, what are some of your biggest accomplishments and that type of stuff with military, the sports world, everything else? And then also, what's some of your biggest regrets?
Biggest accomplishments was just, I got put on like the academic All-American team. I mean, that's kind of dorky, but that was pretty cool, just to get recognized in that way. And, got several pretty cool awards during my time in college football. Big 12 Sports Person of the Year, which is pretty cool. And, I was on I got this National Football Foundation Legacy Award. That's where they do the College Football Hall of Fame inductees every year and all that. That was pretty awesome. I mean, I was sitting up on the dais with Roger Goodell was on one side of me, and the other side was General Odierno, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time. And so that was kind of cool just to like be up there with them. And I'd say biggest regrets. I honestly I have such a fear of regret that I don't let myself not try things typically. I'm trying to think. I don't have, when it comes to like football, I really don't have any, to be honest, that I can think of. Of course, there's certain things you wish you would have done, like on a play. I wish I would have done that, and I didn't. I did this, or whatever, like stuff like that. But even the conversation with Kaepernick and my time in the military, like I don't think I would change anything. There's things about myself I would change every day. I wish I was. Sometimes more motivated. I wish I was more open-minded. I wish I was more committed to things, those kind of like personal characteristics that I think we all probably see in ourselves and wish we did different or did better. But those are things you can actively change. You can't change the past anyway. And so there's nothing, there's nothing I could really think of that. I mean, I wouldn't be exactly where I am, which I'm content with. I think I'm doing the best I can. It's not up to me, wins and losses all the time. It's like you put yourself out there, and the results come when the results come, or they don't come at all, and you just move on with life. And we're all dying anyway. So, I'm not going to look back on stuff and just wonder what if too much, because I got enough anxiety about the future. I don't need to be worrying about the past too. But yeah, so I really don't have a ton of regrets when it comes to that.
All right. Well, our last question for you, we asked this question for all of our special guests that come on our show. We just want some feedback from you and kind of describe your overall experience with us on our show.
Oh, no, this has been great, man. This is cool. I think you guys definitely did your homework, did some research, but which is good. I would say, yeah, just keep asking interesting questions that are maybe outside the box of what the normal person would be asked on there. That would be my only I guess suggestion. But no, it's cool, man. I mean, that's one of the best interviews I ever did was with. I don't know if it's the best interview from my standpoint. I just was so impressed with how prepared he was. I can't even think of his name right now, man. Damn. It's gonna drive me nuts. He had a show on Showtime for a long time. He has like a goatee. He gets fired up about stuff. You got to know who this is. Kind of older. What's his name, man?
You said he's older?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably in his 50s.
Oh, I was thinking Pat McAfee getting fired.
No, McAfee's great.
That's what
Pat
I was
McAfee's
thinking.
great. No, but this dude was so prepared. It's gonna drive me nuts, man. He has a famous interview with Jim Everett, who's an old Rams quarterback, and he keeps calling him Chris Everett, which is a female tennis player, and they almost like get in a fight, dude. Like way back when. Jim Rome.
There we
Jim
go.
Rome.
Yep.
Yeah. I went on Jim Rome's show. I've been on his show a few times, man. So I felt like an idiot. I can't remember his name. But he used to have a show on Showtime. It was a interview show like in person. And dude, that guy knew like every little detail about my story. And I was just thinking about like how many people did he have to, he's probably thousands over the years. And he just researches all the little details about their story and just like remembers it. And it's very prepared. Obviously he has a team helping him out.
For sure.
But like he retained all that information. I was just so impressed with that. But that's important because I've definitely gone on shows before and I don't really know anything. They just knew a little bit of maybe about the Kaepernick thing, or I played football and they get all these details wrong, saying like, oh, you were a Marine, and I was like, I was in the Army, but stuff like that. So that's good, man. I think that doing your research and being ultra over prepared for anything, whether it's a show like this or just anything in life, is not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like all the interviews that I kind of watched about you when I was on YouTube, it felt like they were centered around that Colin Kaepernick story. So I wanted to kind of get more of your story, your personal view. And so that's what excited me.
That's an important thing. I mean, it's an important part of my story, but it's like, yeah, you're right. Like everybody, gets pretty fixated on that. And I get it because it's current events and whatever. But at the same time, like, yeah,
there's more to you.
Yeah, there's more to me.
But yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us. We greatly appreciate you, and we greatly appreciate your service. I want to mention that again. Thank you very much, and we hope you remember your time on our show, and we'd greatly appreciate a follow back on social media on Twitter. And when this episode drops on Friday, we normally drop on Friday at 11 a.m. when this drops. Hopefully, you can retweet it for us, and we can get some more viewers. More people
tag me,
check
man, and I'll retweet it for sure.
Sure, we appreciate that.
No, yeah, thanks again. It was awesome to hear this. I mean, yeah, because we wanted to hear more of your story too, because that's kind of our point is here just to get more people's stories out there. And it's also cool with hearing your background stuff with Colin Kaepernick and all that. But you have a pretty cool and unique story that a lot of people can't say that they've been in the special forces of the military, played for the NFL team and played Division I sports, and just all your connections, that type of stuff. Is pretty cool to hear it. But yeah, thanks again for your service to our country, and best of luck down the road with all your future endeavors. And make sure you guys keep catching up on all of our past videos. Keep Gronk spiking the subscribe button and leave a like on all of our videos and comment. Just interact with us, people from back home that have all of our social media handles. Just get in tune with us and try and give us some feedback so we can improve it for you guys. And tune back in on Friday for this drop. This is going to be cool for people.